ตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ So, I'd like to ask permission from the Venerable Ajahns, Mahatheras and Theras and Sangha members. I'd like to express my greetings and sincere appreciation to all the lay people here today, and to echo Ajahn Viradhammo's words. It's a great privilege to be here again, and the feeling is very warm. And it's a lovely event to take part in. So once again, being part of this is it feels like a great privilege. I was asked recently if I could say a few words at this event on the subject of walking meditation. So, one of Ajahn Chah's senior disciples, one of our respected Ajahns in Thailand called Luang Por Chu, was visiting KL recently, and he was being informed of this upcoming event and was being explained what would be taking place and what the various activities would be. And he commented straight away that if we're presenting something from the tradition of Ajahn Chah, then it should certainly include some aspect of walking meditation, some kind of instruction, and hopefully later on we'll have some practice of walking meditation. This is because very much something at the, you could say at the heart of our monastic practice, but also the practice of lay people, as taught by Ajahn Chah, is that when we come to the formal aspect of our Dhamma practice, what we usually translate into English as meditation, that we shouldn't focus on sitting alone at the expense of the other postures. And so when you listen to talks in Thai, particularly exhortations to Sangha members to strive in their meditation, the expression the teachers always use is sitting and walking meditation. So the two are very much a pair. It's very much understood that the walking meditation aspect is very important, and at times it's appropriate for individuals to put much more emphasis on that over the sitting. So I'll say something about that a bit later on. But that's the context then that this little talk was slipped into the program at the suggestion of one of our senior monks. So this is something you could say Ajahn Chah would have wanted people to hear about, to know about, and to go on and practice. So I'll start by saying perhaps a few words giving the context, the background of walking meditation, and what really we're talking about, how it comes in to our practice. As many of you will know here, if we call ourselves Buddhists or doing the practice of Buddhism, what we really mean by that is walking the middle way, the Eightfold Path, the path of Sila, Samadhi and Panya, virtue, developing concentration, and leading on to cultivating wisdom. So when it comes to the Buddha's explanations then of how we actually do this practice, then there are some technical words or concepts which maybe people will be familiar with, but the notion of mindfulness is something I think we would all agree on is at the heart of the Dummer. The Buddha said it's like salt in a good curry. We always need mindfulness. And so one aspect of mindfulness is mindfulness of the body, being mindful of our body. And one aspect, one way the Buddha described that we can all be mindful of the body is by being mindful in our various postures, or mindful of the postures we're in. And of course there are many postures we can adopt, positions in life, but the four the Buddha spoke of, standing, walking, sitting and lying down. So when it comes to meditating, then it's very clear that the Buddha is not just talking about sitting meditation, and that when it comes to practicing Dhamma, it's not all about meditating in the sitting posture. It's not just about offering food and taking precepts either. It's about cultivating an all-round holistic approach to the Eightfold Path. So being able to integrate it into our daily lives is very important. So this practice of walking meditation is one aspect of that. So it's a formal way to develop mindfulness and meditation, but it also integrates the practice into our daily lives because, of course, we spend so much of our time walking around. Another aspect of the path of practice, something which we should all be familiar with, is the Buddha's many references to the idea of effort and energy. There are many technical terms. Some of you will be familiar with the Pali, but many won't. So just to keep it simple, not to use too many technical terms, words like effort, energy, striving, enthusiasm, these are very positive qualities. And as the Buddha described, or what is it, how exactly do we put forth effort? When it comes to effort with regard to our mental states or our states of mind, the Buddha taught in a rather simple but very nice, very clear way that there are these states of mind or types of thoughts which are unwholesome and those we should try to abandon or prevent from arising in the first place. And then there are states of mind which are considered wholesome or positive, and those we try to cultivate. And if they're there in our mind already, we try to look after them or protect them or nurture them or foster them. So as Dhamma practitioners, well, what are we doing? We're trying to avoid these unpleasant or negative states, these types of states of mind which make us suffer, and bring on the positive, the good ones. So on the negative side, we have the things like the anger and the greed and the drowsiness and the dullness. And on the positive side, there's metta, loving kindness, renunciation, joy, enthusiasm, peace, present moment awareness, mindfulness. So these are all some ways of describing the wholesome and the unwholesome. And so, of course, when we come to sit meditation, I think many people here will be familiar with the practice of sitting meditation. You've perhaps sat retreats or gone along to classes and tried to have a meditation practice at home. I'm sure you have noticed that at times our minds tend to get focused or get locked into unpleasant or painful patterns. Often it's a kind of negativity that won't go away. Often there's some kind of fantasy or some wish or some desire that just won't go away. And very often, I'm sure you've noticed, it's the dullness or the drowsiness. You very often, I'm sure, experience yourself or seen other people experiencing a drowsiness. And then the strange thing is, as soon as the meditation period's over, that drowsiness often seems to go away. As soon as there's some activity to turn our minds to, some kind of external thing to do, we're not drowsy anymore. So this is quite insightful, or it's quite an observation, because it's not that we're actually tired, but that meditation is a very subtle process. This mindfulness is subtle. It's a new thing for most of us. And simply put, our minds and bodies are used to doing something. So in a sense, if we just simply remove all activity and all sphere of thought and try to focus or concentrate or get some special state or attain something, simply put, it often doesn't work, because we're not used to being very aware of such a subtle thing as the breath or some very refined feeling in the body. But if we develop meditation in the walking posture, then of course it's very different. You can actually fall asleep while you're walking, and I've done that myself, but it's much harder. And so when it comes to looking at ourselves and thinking, well, how do we avoid drowsiness? To do more walking over sitting is a very good thing to do. It's a very commonly taught technique. And remember, Buddha, Buddho, actually means awake. Of course, we use it in the more spiritual or the lofty sense, to be awake to truth, or awake to the Four Noble Truths, or awakened to reality. But I think it's very important that we have to be awake in the basic sense as well. If we're not really awake in the usual sense, then the more refined awakening will probably take a bit longer. So I think it's important to develop wakefulness, enthusiasm, a positive approach to our practice. So I'm just beginning now by giving a few background, some comments around this practice of walking meditation. Now, historically, we can read the scriptures and we can read about the Lord Buddha in his time of striving. There's not too much said about how he was practicing, what exact practices the Buddha was doing. We know he did ascetic practices and then cultivated refined concentration before his enlightenment. And so we have a traditional image of the Lord Buddha and people attaining enlightenment, sitting meditation, the image of the Lord Buddha enlightened or approaching enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, naturally gives a sense that enlightenment, meditation leading to enlightenment is to be done sitting. And of course that is true to a certain extent, because sitting is one of the very important postures. But there can be a tendency to ignore the other postures. But after that, after the Buddha's enlightenment, if we look at the scriptures, we do often hear and read about the Buddha describing how to practice, and the Buddha will often teach the monks that after the meal you go to a forest or a grove or some secluded place. And sometimes the Buddha will describe sitting meditation, but often we read that the Buddha or his disciples pass the day in sitting and walking. So again, we have the sense of the two being a pair. You can sit, you can walk. And it would just seem to make sense. It would just seem to be in line with our experience that it's just very difficult to have your meal and then go and sit meditation with a full stomach. It's just very, very drowsy. One can imagine in India or in Asia being a hot, humid climate. So naturally one would tend towards walking, both as a means of digesting your food, but also as a means of wakefulness. So when the Buddha talks about sitting and walking, we have to remember that second word. Similarly, in the evening, the Buddha teaches us in the first watch of the night, that's after dusk, say after 6 to 10 p.m., to spend the time in sitting and walking meditation before resting, and then later on in the night, almost at dawn, again, the Buddha encourages or trains the monks to sit and walk. So again, by saying this, to give the context that this is very much at the heart of the Buddha's teachings and his encouragements to the monks, and also the practice of cultivating mindfulness. We have stories from the scriptures during the time of the life of the Buddha, of monks and nuns striving throughout the whole night in walking meditation. There's one very famous story where a monk was putting forth so much effort in walking meditation that the soles of his feet wore through to a point where his feet became bloodied. That gave the opportunity for a lovely teaching from the Buddha on right effort. He taught this monk to put forth just the right amount of effort. He gave this lovely simile of when this monk was a layman in the past and used to play a musical instrument, that the strings would be neither too tight nor too loose. If they were too tight, the sound of the instrument wouldn't be sweet. If they were too loose, it wouldn't be sweet. But the context is that the monk was striving in formal meditation throughout the night. So clearly this is something which would have been practiced and would have been understood, that this is a posture to put forth effort into. But of course we have the chance then to hear that we have to find the middle way. During the modern period, during this period, the Ajahn Chah era of the Thai forest tradition over the last 50, 60, 70 years, it's very common for our teachers to describe how early during their period of monastic training, they would be dedicated to many, many hours of sitting and walking meditation, sometimes describing periods during the day, after the meal, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, or late into the night. So it's something which us as junior monks, and myself right from the time I ordained, was always encouraged to use this posture. One finds when one changes position from sitting and begins to walk up and down, it's very often a way that as the body perhaps relaxes some of the tension that can build up with a very, very still and perhaps rather rigid or forced sitting position. As the body begins to move and perhaps some of the wind element flows through the body very naturally as food is digested, and as perhaps that strong effort to concentrate and focus the mind is lessened to a more broad, a more general awareness practice, then some of the more negative or perhaps painful types of states which can build up during meditation are very quickly and very easily dissipated. There's a very famous story. Luang Por Chah, Ajahn Chah, our teacher, often used to share this. In fact, he insisted on sharing this in his first biography. There was a time in his young days when his mind was very much inflamed with sexual desire. And for that there was simply no other antidote, nothing to do. There was nothing you can do to eliminate this. He simply walked up and down and walked up and down and walked up and down until finally it went away. It's just sometimes a question of giving the mind and the body something else to do, some other object to attend to, and then something that's seizing our mind can dissipate. So I've said a few words on the background of walking meditation. I've been asked to perhaps weave or include in this talk a demonstration, a bit of live demo on stage. And I didn't think to sort of prepare somebody to be my model, so I think I'm going to have to just do it myself. So with the permission of the Sangha, I'll do some sashaying to and fro in various postures and at various speeds and with various mantras, just to give people some idea of exactly what we're talking about, and then maybe I'll say a few words of conclusion. So with walking meditation, it's in Pali it's called Jankama. In Thai it's we call Jongkrom. So if any of you are familiar with the Thai forest monks or you go to Thai monasteries, you may well hear this word Jongkrom. Jongkrom, it means walking meditation, from the Pali Jankama, which means to do this practice. So I'll switch to a wireless mic. As I said, the emphasis of walking meditation is very much maintaining one's mindfulness in a walking posture. So before we begin to actually walk, and in a sense I should say now, we've also have the standing posture, and I can maybe put the two together and give a plug for standing meditation as well as walking meditation. It's a way of bringing our awareness to the body. We all have a body, and we can experience the body in these various postures, and we can experience the feeling, the head, the neck, the trunk, the torso, our pelvic area, the groin, and the legs, right down to our feet. And we can be very mindful of this. What does it feel like to be standing here right now, physically? And it's interesting, as soon as we begin to turn our attention, say, away from what's happening in our thought realm, we can take up the body as an alternative area to be thinking about or to be aware of. Straight away, I know my experience is my mind becomes very relaxed straight away. I feel very comfortable in the body, and it's also very present. Our Dummer practice is essentially around being aware of our present moment experience as it arises and passes away. So what more present moment is there than simply our physical feeling right here, right now? So we have this physical body in standing. And when we come to actually walk meditation, it's very common to have a path. The path can be as short as 3 or 4 meters long, or as long as 20, 30 meters long. It really depends on the situation. If you're in a hut or you're flat, it can be short. If you're in a retreat center or a monastery with a long, straight path, then it can be very long. So first I'll just maybe do some practical demonstrating. I think it's very important before we begin walking, not just to start walking in a very distracted way. It's important to focus ourselves before we begin to walk. Be aware that now we begin our period of walking meditation in just the same way that before we sit, we're always taught, now I begin my sitting meditation, and even to recollect the Buddha, the Dummer, the Sangha, and to make an aspiration to dedicate the merits of this subsequent period of meditation, to share the merits with all sentient beings. And also it may be very useful to actually adhitthana, which means to determine a certain period of time. It's very, very easy to walk up and down, and after 5 minutes or 10 minutes to be thinking, oh, a bit tired, or maybe a bit of an ache here, or just that feeling, never mind lah, enough lah, cukup lah. And if you haven't made an adhitthana or this determination, then sometimes you just stop. And one thing with walking meditation, it's very, very useful to actually be able to cultivate slightly longer period. And I'll say a bit more about that later on, about the time. So first then, just a little bit about what we might call the technique, how to do it. I'm sure many people have done it before, but maybe some of you haven't. So if we have a path in front of us, or it can be a corridor in your house, or it can be a place out in the open, just an area. If it's flat, it's useful. And if there's a sense of being a road, that's also useful. We can keep our eyes downcast, and especially not have to worry about people coming and going or cars, a quiet place. Then we can just bring our attention into the body, our awareness into the standing posture. And for myself and many people, the first way to begin is to feel the sensation of being very well planted on the ground. when we stand, we're standing on the ground. There's a feeling there somewhere in our feet. Some people breathe in and out very deeply, once, twice, 3 times, and then begin the walking. So I'll turn to the side now. And in our tradition, the Thai forest tradition, Ajahn Chah tradition, the pace we walk at is usually, you could just say, average walking pace. So taking a certain posture, we have our hands. Some people like to put their hands in front of them. Some people prefer to have their hands behind them. But for some reason, the more classic, I think you could say traditional Thai forest posture, you'll see pictures of the Kruba Ajahn, our enlightened masters, Ajahn Mun, Ajahn Chah, were often walking in this position. So this seems to be the classic, but I don't think it really matters that much. Find a posture for your hands, or even just side by side, to walk up and down. So I'll just walk up and down at a normal pace. But the key is to find some aspect of what we call mindfulness. So being mindful of the sensation of your feet touching the ground is one. So it seems very simple, doesn't it? And in a sense it is. It's just that. Nothing more, nothing less. I think you'll find, most of us have found that as we walk across a certain path, it may be only 1 or 2 steps until our awareness or our mindfulness has wandered off someplace else. And just like with sitting meditation, that's okay, that's normal. Whether it's quickly or perhaps an hour later, remember, we're walking meditation, come back to the body, come back to the feet, and carry on. Now, when I reached the end there, I just stopped. So, what I like to do, and what we're always taught by our teachers, again, is to be very aware. You reach the end of your path, stop for a moment, and then the process of turning round to go back also has to be done in a mindful way, and it's very, it's quite nice to have a little, you could say a little routine. Myself, I have a very simple routine where I step round like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just a very simple technique, nothing that I particularly thought of, but something which has become a habit, and it just helps keep the awareness on that particular practice, rather than simply turning around in a way where one isn't aware, say, of how many steps you take, or whether you turn to the left or turn to the right. And then also, in not being aware and losing awareness of the body at that point, it provides an opening for distracting thoughts to arise. So we have to have some way of maintaining the mindfulness throughout the whole process, walking from one end of the path to the other, stopping, turning, and then return, and then coming back. So if you walk to the end of the path, reach the end of your path, stop for a moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then walk back to the end of the other path, the other end of the path. Stopping at the end of the path, very much simply in the present moment, no real thoughts, nothing of the past, nothing of the future, no problems, just standing here. And 1, 2, 3, 4. A slight pause, aware that you're about to begin the walk back down the path, and simply walking, very simply, neither too fast nor too slow, and maintaining an awareness. Every step, there's a contact to the foot on the floor. This is a nice wooden stage. It's not particularly cold or hot, so it's just a very neutral type of feeling. It can be grass, it could be smooth concrete or carpet, whatever. Each different surface has a different feeling. You might have a little crack or a cut on your foot, which hurts a little bit. You get some kind of sensation every step. So there's always something there. There's always something that we can be aware of. So this walking meditation provides a very, very, like a fertile ground for our awareness. It's not just walking, it's much, much more than that. Now, many people like to use what we call a mantra, some kind of recitation word, just like in sitting meditation, to help keep the mind with the process of walking. So, in the same way that Putto is often taught in Thailand as a recitation word with the in and out breathing, then similarly you can recite that with the steps. So in your mind, or even out loud if you're alone, just simply reciting Putto, 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 Putto. Sorry, Putto is the rather more Thai way of pronouncing the word Buddho. So it means awake, it means aware, it means enlightened. So it's a very simple two-syllable word, one that we should, in a sense, want to be reciting as a contemplation, as well as a simple way of keeping the mind with the feet. And there are any number of little recitation words or tricks or techniques. Another very common one is simply counting. A path may well have a certain amount of steps which you decide for yourself, or it's simply the length of the path. And so you can simply count those in your head as you go from one end to the other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Stop. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So that's just like when you're counting in sitting meditation. It's a very easy way to see, the extent to which one's distracted. You can see just how many steps you can stay with the counting before you start thinking about something else. And it's just so simple, and that's really all it's about. So this is about, you could say, developing kind of effort or an energy in the practice as opposed to sitting, especially if one's dull, and abandoning sort of unwholesome states of, say, anger, frustration, which people often get into while sitting meditation, or some kind of fantasy, some kind of craving, something we want, simply by changing posture and doing something so simple, so very basic, but so very present. We say right here, right now. So this is a couple of simple ways of simply walking up and down, using the sensation of the feet and using Buddho or counting, whatever works. We have a lovely word in Thai which is sabai. Sabai means relaxed or calm or in a good mood. And so that's a very nice two-syllable word. You can go sabai, sabai. So that's a good one when you're feeling a bit frustrated or tensed. It just helps relax one. So again, we can all each find our own word. You can do relax. Just be is another classic mantra. So often when we're practicing, the frustration is that we want to just be in the present moment, but we can't because we're worried about something else. So to actually recite those words, just be, we very much realize, oh yeah, I'm just walking up and down, there's nothing happening here, and then the story can just fade away. So I'd like to just give one more example of how we can actually walk meditation, cultivating an object, and that's to incorporate metta into our walking meditation. Metta means loving kindness or loving friendliness or well-wishing or warmth. It's one of what we call the boundless states. It's very important, I think, if we were to say, well, what are some of the things at the heart of of Dhamma Vinaya, or at the heart of our practice, metta is surely one. Loving kindness. And very often we think that the time we have, if we get angry, then we have to develop loving kindness as an antidote, which is true, but actually the Buddha and all the enlightened masters have taught us to cultivate metta all the time, so that actually negativity and anger doesn't arise, and as a way of being one who gives. So as a support of our dana, and as a support of our practice of compassion, and giving rise finally to joy and equanimity, metta, or loving kindness, has to be cultivated. So how do we do it? Well, we do it by offering and being friendly and giving helpful support to people, as well as consciously turning our minds towards thoughts of loving kindness when we're feeling angry. But we can also do it while sitting meditation and walking meditation. So one way to do it is simply by reciting, again, the mantra. And one of our chants, a very simple chant, begins with the words, "May I be well." So we begin by cultivating metta, or loving kindness, towards ourselves. So we can go, "May I be well. May I be well. May I be well." Because so often what we're experiencing is some kind of inner pain, or a tension, or an anxiety, or we're caught up in some situation in our lives which is difficult, and we may well have got ourselves into it, so there may well be the additional sense of self-hatred or blaming, and then we're trying to meditate and we feel even worse about it because, of course, it's frustrating. So actually what we want to do is simply bring up the very simple thought that it's quite okay, and it's what we want, it's just to be well and just to be happy. So to find an expression or a phrase which somehow seems to fit with what we need to tell ourselves or reassure ourselves with, and then simply to recite that as we walk up and down. And so in cultivating loving kindness meditation, so much of the emphasis is actually beginning with ourselves. This is something which seems to be a paradox, but we have to begin with ourselves. If we're not yet happy and at ease in ourselves, then the ability to cultivate and share loving kindness with other people will be so much less. So, may I be well. May I be kind. May I be wise. May I be free. These are some concepts which, as Dhamma practitioners, we're actually trying to cultivate in ourselves. Kindness, wisdom, wellness, freedom. And so this type of meditation can be a way of really getting clear on that concept and really bringing that into our lives through a kind of constant repetition. Because I think quite simply we just forget. And so we make decisions and we undertake things and we speak and act in ways which don't lead towards wellness and kindness and wisdom and freedom. So actually it seems sort of obvious, but we do have to keep bringing that to mind. So the process of doing that in walking is something which can be very, very useful. It's very, very relaxing. And it's something which, from the formal practice of walking meditation, we can bring into the rest of our lives. So I think that concludes the live demo. I think you get the gist of that. Later on, after the break, there'll be a period of walking meditation here that people are invited to try it out for yourselves. And then, of course, in your homes or on retreats or whenever you can, really try to be doing walking meditation. So I'll just sit down and say a few concluding words. in a sense, this topic, walking meditation or jongkrom or jankama, it's actually a very, very, it's something which there's much, much more to be said. It's much more of a practice that we can undertake and learn for ourselves how actually to integrate it into our lives, into our Dharma practice. The Buddha talked about the practice of walking meditation and outlined many benefits. And there are some very simple physical ones. One digests one's food easily. I think that's just a very obvious point. As you know, so much of the Buddha's advice was just so practical. But on the more profound or deeper level, the Buddha talked about the cultivation of meditation, or what he called Samadhi, states of concentration. And the Buddha taught that somebody who puts a lot of time and effort into walking meditation, their mind will attain to concentration swiftly and easily. So this is something which is very important. If we see our Dharma practice as holistic, then not distinguishing, now I'm sitting, now I'm walking, now I'm doing dana, now I'm doing metta, now I'm whatever. We see it as part of a complex whole. Then when we do walking meditation, it's something which facilitates the mind to quickly attain concentration or peace at other times as well, because we're just so used to abandoning these sort of unwholesome states. We're used to setting up effort and energy, and we're cultivating the feeling of being relaxed, the feeling of being at ease, at peace with ourselves, which is just so important. But not only that, the Buddha went on to say, having quickly and easily attained to Samadhi, then the mind will remain there for a long time. And so this is another aspect of the walking. It seems that because it does take an extra bit of effort in order to begin that practice and to turn the mind towards that, to cultivate that sati, then when the mind does calm down, does settle in the present moment, somehow it's more, you could say, more solid. There's a firm anchor there. And the combination of these wholesome states of mind, the result seems to be that the concentration or the peace that we're then able to develop when we're sitting or at other times in our lives is somehow firmer and somehow stronger. So this is how the initial practice of the walking meditation, which is more what we call calming or samatha, in the technical, to use the technical term. That's to say, abandoning the proliferation and distracted thoughts or negativity or drowsiness. We're bringing the mind to calm, but then it's a pair, it's linked with insight. It leads to the calm mind, the mind which is still, the mind which is peaceful, can then develop what we call insight, or you know this word, vipassana, which we can simply summarize as meaning seeing things as they are, i.e. seeing our lives or the world or phenomena arising and passing away as impermanent and as not entirely pleasurable, so leading to some kind of dukkha. These are the kind of insights which we can then use the peace of mind which we've developed in meditation, walking meditation, to develop. So the practice is a very whole one. I think it's important for us not to separate the two, or separate any aspect of our Dhamma practice. Now, the last thing I'd like to just mention is just in terms of a length of time when it comes to walking meditation and how one can structure that. It's something which I think we can each learn for ourselves, but it's something, walking meditation, walking up and down, I must say it does feel weird at first, and it looks weird. There's famous, famous stories and examples of people practicing walking meditation and other people thinking they're crazy. One time Ajahn Chah was in America and people were walking in this very, very slow way, and he rather jokingly went up to them and said, "I hope you get better soon." So yes, it can look weird, and it does feel weird at first. And I remember when I ordained in a monastery in Thailand, not as part of the Ajahn Chah teaching, not as part of the Ajahn Chah tradition or group. And my first day there, I didn't know anything about the Dummer or Vinaya or meditation. And I saw a nun, a mechi, a white-robed nun, walking up and down. And I definitely thought she was crazy, because I'd heard that, sometimes people in monasteries do go funny. That does happen, and I'd heard that. And I thought, oh no, this is one of those monasteries. So I was looking at this nun, and then I was asked by somebody, "Do you want to try this?" And I said, no, I don't. And so I didn't do it at my first monastery. Then very luckily, I was transferred, you could say, sent away to this Ajahn Chah temple in the northeast Thailand, Wat Banana Chart. And I arrived there, and it was May, which in Thailand, May is the end of the hot season and the beginning of the rains. It's often a particularly humid and sticky time. It's like the worst of both seasons together. And so I arrived in May, and it was a particularly hot and sticky May. And the senior monk there, responsible of the monastery at the time, had devised the schedule, or had restructured it a bit in order to avoid the kind of drowsiness that can very much overcome everyone in the evening. So evening chanting and meditation, which usually begins at about 7 o'clock with chanting and then a period of sitting meditation and perhaps a Dhamma talk. Instead of the evening meditation, the first thing was 2 hours of walking meditation. So I was told this, you have to do 2 hours of walking meditation. I thought, oh no, in this place, everyone must be crazy here then, if that's what we have to do. And I was determined not to do this. So my first few days, I just sort of hid in my kuti, in my hut, while people were doing their walking meditation. But then I thought, after a while, I realized that it seemed like quite a nice thing to be doing, quite a normal thing to be doing. I learned what it was about and began to try it myself. And the period of time just seemed absolutely interminable. After 5 or 10 minutes, I wanted to stop. After half an hour, I definitely wanted to stop. But walking up and down in the hall, you just felt, well, you couldn't stop. So come what may, force myself to just go up and down, up and down. And this is the strange thing, just somehow the feeling shifted after 45 minutes, after an hour. And when I was thinking, oh, how am I going to survive the second hour? Suddenly, that whole feeling was just gone. There was didn't feel weird, it didn't feel painful, didn't feel at all strange. It was just so very natural. And just thinking, and I realized that was the happiest I'd been, certainly since I'd ordained as a novice, just temporarily. And I began to think, when was the last time I was this happy? And I began to think back over the months and over the years, and I couldn't remember a time that I'd felt so relaxed, because I began to see, I'm always worried about something. And here I am, just walking up and down in the back of the hall, like the monk had taught me. He said, just just walk, very relaxed, walking pace, don't worry too much. Feel the feeling of the floor, your feet on the floor. And so I was just following these very simple instructions and just feeling so relaxed and so happy. And so in a sense, it was the beginning of this sort of bit of an understanding, bit of an insight into the practice, simply through having to do it and having a period, a long period rather than a short period. Sometimes we need to simply go through that and then experience a bit, you could say a bit of the taste of Dhamma, a bit of the present moment, and then we get it. So as a last thing to say, in terms of length of time, if anyone does have an hour or 2 or 3, it just seems an incredibly long amount of time, but to give it a go. And the real insight, or the really interesting thing, is that one would imagine, say, if you've got an ache somewhere or you're bored or restless, that it would just get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. But very often it's the case that suddenly something shifts and it's gone. And then that can lead to insight or contemplation of anicca, impermanence, which is a very, very wonderful thing to see into. So I've spoken for a long time, and thank you for your attention. As I said, what I've touched on is very, very brief and a bit haphazard. It's something which there's so much more one could say on it. I'd simply like to end by again expressing my appreciation, and I'd like to share the merits of my practice and the practice of all of us with the Buddha and Luang Por Chah and all our teachers, and dedicate the well-being that we cultivate doing this practice of walking meditation, whether it's calming our minds, developing vipassana, or the practice of metta to our parents and teachers and all sentient beings. And lastly, particularly, I'd like to share the merits with my first walking meditation teacher, who's right here, Ajahn Kalyano. Probably can't remember, but it was him who 21 years ago gave me these very nice, very simple instructions on how to do it, and helped me to survive this 2-hour walking meditation period. It's become a very joyful part of my meditation practice, so I especially share this with Ajahn Kalyano, and I'd like to end at that point.